Okay, well, welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you here for the very first talk session. It's a new series of webinars we are offering during the faculty lounge. This session is designed to support you in your teaching and professional growth, and it's only 30 minutes. We know your time is valuable, so we really appreciate you being here today. So let's get ready for an engaging and practical session. Before we get started, I want to tell you that in 2025, we are introducing a new way for faculty to receive a certificate of attendance for any of the live sessions that you attend from the Light Center. If you would like one, simply complete a short form at the end of the webinar. I'm going to share the link with you at the end of the webinar. And this form includes a quick feedback section because we need your input to help us improve future events. So the link will be shared in the chat before we wrap up, okay? So stay tuned. Before we begin, let's go over a few simple guidelines to ensure a smooth and engaging session. Mute your microphone when you're not speaking to keep the audio clear. Sarah, can you show that slide with...
Oh gosh.
Okay, well, I can, it's okay.
Oh, here
You
we
can
go.
use the chat to ask questions or share thoughts. We encourage participation, active participation. So engage actively by responding to, interacting with this session. Be respectful of different viewpoints. This is a space for learning and collaboration. If you experience any issues, please try to refresh or rejoin the session. Finally, this session is being recorded for those who could not attend, and it will be shared in this month's PD2Go newsletter. So let's get started with this very first talk series webinar. Grades alone don't help students grow. We know that. Effective feedback does. In this webinar, we'll explore 5 easy and powerful ways to give feedback that is clear, helpful, and motivating. Walk away with practical tips to support your students and boost success. So at the end, we'll share job aids, handouts, resources, and access to an online forum on Acorn, your professional development LMS, to keep the conversation going. So leading our 30-minute session today is Dr. Sarah Gray, an academic success manager and doctoral writing center specialist here at Westcliff University. She's here to share best practices concerning feedback and answer your questions. So Sarah, let's get started. Thank you so much for always being willing to help our faculty.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction and for inviting me to present today. So hopefully we are, or anyway, I'm done with the technical difficulties on my end so far. So I'm excited to present to you about feedback today. As Evelyn has already pointed out, I'm Dr. Sarah Gray. I've recently stepped into the role as Academic Success Manager, but I have been and will always be and consider myself a faculty member, just like you guys. I love to teach. That really is just kind of the heart and soul of what I do. And I've been teaching in one capacity or another for over a decade at this point. And in addition to that, as the director of the Writing Center and the Doctoral Writing Center, one of the key things that I focus on is not only providing feedback, but also helping to ensure that my writing specialists provide strong feedback for growth and improvement to your students and all of the students at Westcliff, and also do everything that I can to help them improve that feedback every day as much as we can. So now what I want to do is provide to you some of the tips that we use on a daily basis to make sure that when we provide that feedback to them, it's always just something that is meant to help them grow as writers and also help them always to be improving. So without any further ado, our agenda for today is to talk about why feedback matters, and then I'll get right into those tips that we use. And then we'll talk about some, throughout as we're going through the tips, we'll be looking at some specific examples and applications for that feedback. And then we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end of it. So first, talking about why feedback matters. I think we all know that feedback is a lot more than just pointing out mistakes. Hopefully we all know that. So it's a tool to empower our students, guide them toward mastery, and also boost their confidence. When we do it right, it doesn't just help the students improve their work, it also shapes their approach toward learning itself. So Moving on with feedback, let's go ahead and just jump right in to our first tip. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and open up this chat so that so that if anybody asks anything, I can see it and I'll also let it distract me. But I'm also periodically throughout this, I'm going to pause and I'll ask you guys for questions. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to pause them or to put them in the chat. I'm actually going to leave them on my screen that's over here to my right so it doesn't distract me. So whenever I pause, I'll be sure to look in that and see if we've got any questions that I missed. All right. So actually, before I jump into tip one, does anyone have anything that they want to mention about feedback or ask about feedback before we jump right in and get started?
I think one of the things that I struggle with when I'm giving student feedbacks, Dr. Gray, is getting my students to actually read the feedback and then take it seriously. Time and time again, I find myself saying the same thing over and over. So I guess I would like to know a little bit more about how to encourage them to actually use my feedback appropriately.
Yes, that is actually something that I struggle with a lot as well. And actually, I struggled with whether or not to make this one of my tips, and I chose not to. But now I'm kind of doubling back on that. One of the things that I do regularly with my students in classes is I actually require a now I'm losing the word for it, a reflection assignment on the feedback specifically. It's very short, very to the point. It's usually just like 1 to 2, sometimes 3 paragraphs that has them explain exactly how they use the feedback that I provide to them. So the only way that they can do that assignment is to actually read the feedback. So it basically forces them to read it. So it's, a little bit underhanded, but at the same time, it's like they are definitely getting a benefit out of it because they're reading the feedback and it's basically making them not only read it, but also use it. So I find those reflection assignments are not only, and there's also one other benefit to that. It not only forces them to read the feedback and use it, but it also forces them to think about the process that they went through in revision. So thinking about that writing process as well is something that's going to be, that much more efficient and effective as they continue to write. So again, that was something that I thought about including as like a kind of stealth sixth tip. But I ended up not including it. But that's a great thought and a great question because I think we all struggle with that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I,
Go ahead.
yeah, I think it's very, very important because it tells us what the external environment outside of ourselves is telling us what we are learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have to take it in a benign fashion that one size fits all. This is very important. And even here, I think it would be better if we have different levels of feedbacks, whether they are undergraduate studies. It's definitely the look for it. But the undergraduates need to look at it as a beneficial. They just want to see it only from a conceptual standpoint, which could be even universal or culture bound. So that's my point.
Okay. All right. Other thoughts before we jump right in? Okay. So first tip that I have to suggest here. Specific and constructive feedback. Basically, what we're talking about here is the foundation of effective feedback for improvement. Being specific and constructive. So I know a lot of times it's easy to kind of be, we get in a hurry. And so it's easy to run into a little bit of, vague feedback. So instead of saying something like this needs work, it's important to make sure we're pinpointing exactly what it is that needs to be worked on well and what can be improved. So for instance, you might highlight something like a strong thesis statement or a well-researched section, and then guide the student on with how to strengthen a weaker or a weaker area or something that needs or that is an opportunity for improvement. So this approach makes your feedback more actionable. So just saying your business plan is lacking, that's not really actionable. It doesn't tell them anything specific that they can do. But if we provide them with something that is specific, then they actually have an action step that they can follow. So it's like, okay, if I do this, then I know that this is something that I can improve, right? So tip 1, be specific and constructive. All right. Step 2 or tip 2 is providing some timely and balanced feedback. And that really goes along with making sure that the feedback is specific and constructive, because that was one of the things that I pointed out with the example in the first one, is that we want to make sure it's balanced. So we're not just going, here's everything you did wrong. And then by the time they get done reading the feedback, they're crying in a corner and it's just a problem. So that's not the goal that we're looking for here. Though having, all of us having been through grad school, we know that crying in a corner is probably not uncommon, right? So, but that's not our goal. We don't want to cause that. So timely and balanced feedback is something that we can do to try to help our students avoid those moments crying in the corner. So timing is everything when it comes to feedback. And giving feedback too late can diminish its impact, as we know, while providing it promptly ensures relevance and also ensures that our students have enough time to actually act on that feedback. And balance, of course, is key. So start with something that they've done well whenever you can, and then use that as kind of like a springboard before moving into the constructive feedback. So this mix is not only going to motivate them, but it's also going to help them see where they're succeeding and then where they need to grow. So we try to do this in the Writing Center as much as we possibly can. And don't think of it as something that, like, in this exact same comment, I need to say something good and something that they need to work on. You can just kind of sprinkle these little moments of happiness throughout the paper. So whenever I see them, if I see somebody, oh, this is a really great piece of source support that they've used over here, I'm going to drop a comment that says, this is excellent. This is wonderful support that you've used here. And whenever you can, also explain why it's great. And then, a couple of sentences down, if there's an area for improvement, then, you're going to go ahead and explain why. So it doesn't have to happen like sandwiched right together. Just try as much as you can to balance the good with the bad throughout the entirety of the paper. So we have an example. Imagine a student submits a lesson plan. Instead of waiting, weeks to say, hey, this is incomplete, try to be as timely as you can to let them know, all right, so your multimedia resources are, engaging, consider adding some assessments to your test comprehension. So that way they can really, act on it when it still matters, to keep their momentum going as they grow, rather than, waiting a couple weeks and maybe you've already moved past lesson planning into something completely different. Okay, so I've gone through 2 tips so far, so let's go ahead and pause so that we can ask some questions, give some thoughts, chat a little bit, see what's been going on in the chat. Let's see. Divide my feedback into 3 parts: 1 hits, 2 misses, and 3 you will benefit from. I love that. So we've got what you did well, what you need to work on, and then we've got actionable feedbacks as well. So I love that breakup into those 3 pieces. And so then also, like, kind of labeling it that way lets the student know like exactly what they're looking at. That's a great idea.
I'm kind of curious if people find it a best practice to use like a sandwich method where you take 2 positive points of feedback and then sandwich it with the constructive feedback in the middle.
Okay. So I know I do that with quotes a lot. So it's like, here's what I introduced somebody, and then here's your quote, and then here's the explanation of it. And so then doing that with feedback, like, here's something you did well, here's something you need to work on, and then here's something else that you did well. Is that what you're saying? I see no issue with that at all. What's everyone else's thoughts?
I guess the trap would be praising them for mediocrity, because a
Okay.
lot of stuff is oh, you great, you spelled this right. I mean, it's and it can come across as well as not only insincere but just inauthentic. Feedback, of course, is essential. Good feedback, timely feedback is essential. You know, I know like I've got well over 100 students. I download every single paper, every single one, and make comments, changes, and so forth on their papers. I make editing comments, etc., and I upload every one, and they're always done before the next class. And I think that could be lost too, because I know when I was a student, I, how much I despised it, where you would submit something on a Friday, 2 weeks later, you still don't have feedback on it, and that just seems to be disingenuous. I mean, really, if you want to show that you care, that part is can't be lost in it. But the details of the feedback, if it's not really going to be constructive to help them, and then it's you know, we're not, we can't gentle parent students.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend, gentle parenting, but I don't think we run the risk of gentle parenting by providing balance. But we do run the risk of getting, a little bit too gentle. That's one thing that I would say if we go with the sandwich method, one issue that I might see arising, is that just because of the way we think, we have a tendency to focus more on the last thing we hear, than we do on the things that we hear before that. And so we do run the risk, if we do the sandwich method, of having our students take away that last positive piece of feedback that we gave them and focusing only on that, as opposed to focusing on that actionable item that we left in the middle. So I would see that maybe as a possible issue of using the sandwich method, rather than just focusing on ensuring that we have balance. Um, so I could kind of see a little bit of an issue arising, because if it's good action, good, then you're actually going to be teetering a little bit far on the side of saying this is all the stuff that you're doing well, and then less opportunity for improvement. Um,
No, I understand that, but what I come across, especially the doctoral level, I'll have a paper, and they'll say, "Well, my last teacher said it was good, and my writing was good." I'm like, "Yeah, my mother said I was good looking, and yet here we are." You know,
yeah.
it's a kind of a false sense of who they are. That's the issue. Not so much something that positives can't be in there, but
Mhm.
a lot of it's just you're saying it to make them feel good instead of something that would be, again, more realistic. Because again, the writing that I see in many of my classes going in is not good, and but they've been praised for it. So I get kind of to be the designated schmuck also about, well, no, this isn't right, this isn't correct, this isn't, your references aren't right, their references are terrible, or and you, I shouldn't have to be like that, but that's what can be consequential to this.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I guess it does definitely come down to your own choice of how you want to approach it, but I feel like there is a way to balance, you know, being able to tell a student that they have poor sources, or that their writing is not up to an academic standard, without destroying them in the process. Right? And I
Right.
think
You
that's
don't
what,
call them names or nothing like that, or I can't believe how stupid you were, but pointing the things out. This is a website. Websites are not academic
right.
sources, that type of stuff.
Right. And I mean,
Right.
if there is a professor who came along before who didn't do that, I mean, really, that's kind of not your issue. The issue is that you need to point out what they are talking about now. But what we're talking about in this session right now is that there are absolutely ways that you can do that in a manner that is still supportive to the student, and that is, you know, gonna help them to grow and to improve. And, if they bring up, well, my previous professor said A, B, and C, it's like, okay, that's fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is what I see in front of me, and what I see in front of me is what I'm telling you. So let's move forward, as opposed to looking at what was behind us, right? So that's what we're focusing on. Um, let's see, what else do we have here? I grade on Monday. The challenge that will give for a late student, delaying the grading is punishing the good for the late submission. Yeah, then I have to visit the grading twice. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, I
Okay.
think we all face the challenge of trying to get all the grading done as quickly as we can, each of us having anywhere from 50 to 100 or more students and trying to get all of the grading done in time. That's
Right.
definitely going to be something that we all face the challenge of. And I wish I could build a TARDIS for every single one of us, but unfortunately that is not within my power. So once it
How do
becomes
you
huh?
how do you guys handle the issue of a student that I mean, you've completed all your grading and stuff, you're staying ahead of the curve and everything? Because I typically will grade, throughout the week as the assignments come in. So like last night I was grading assignments that came in even though they weren't due till Sunday. But then you have that one student or that two students or that 5 or 10 or however many students that always seems to be like, you know, 3 weeks late and stuff. And you're sitting there like, man, how do I balance I have to I want to enforce the fact that, you turn this thing in 3 or 4 weeks late and stuff and just not give you the opportunity to turn it in with the fact that you may be looking at someone that's rocking a 60 or something in the class and you're trying to give them a way to uh, get their grade up and certainly pass the class. But at the same time, you don't want to be unfair to everyone because, when you get toward like week 8 and you can't necessarily be as magnanimous and stuff, then it's like, oh, but you gave so-and-so, they turned in their assignment 3 weeks late and you let them and so on and so forth. So what's kind of the consensus on how you guys handle that?
Can I get you guys to put a pin in that for a second? We're going to table that for the Q&A at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, we get to kind of take this into like a discussion session afterward. But I want to make
Gotcha.
sure we get through all of our tips first. And I feel like that one's going to be a discussion that we could go on with forever. So
Dr. Gray, I
Dr.
actually have,
Gray, Dr. Gray, here,
yeah.
uh, if I say your lesson plans were incomplete, wouldn't that make me feel a little bit insensitive to the students' well-being, especially if they are new to the university? Shouldn't I be more prudent and more showing some understanding before they meet the challenges of the university? How do you
Right.
think about
Which is
it?
why,
Shouldn't we say something nice about it?
right. And that's why
Shouldn't
your
we
lesson plans.
express the good points first? Shouldn't we express the good points first, and then when we go to this kind of things, I don't think
Yes.
that will be very uncomfortable for them.
Yes. Which
Am
is
I
why
okay, or I'm okay to use all this, but I prefer the other one. I want to be seen as more prudent and more sensitive to
yes.
the
And that
student.
is why your lesson plans are incomplete is a poor example. Yes, you definitely, yeah. That's why your lesson plans were incomplete. It's not going to help them. It doesn't tell them what the issue is or anything. That's a poor example. An improved example of this is one that says, here's something that you did well. Now here's an actionable thing that you can do to make it better and make your lesson plan complete, right? So you make an excellent point.
I'm with
All right.
Dr. Johnson. Sometimes it's hard to find something good to latch on.
Right.
Like, I got a person that I gave a 53 last night to and stuff. There just was nothing there to make a sandwich out of.
Okay, so now making sure that we can go ahead and get through all of these because I've got a very short amount of time left. Tip number 3, we want to make sure we are focusing on clarity and focus. Students can feel overwhelmed by the amount of feedback if it's too dense or if we're using jargon. Especially, we're in very specialized fields, a lot of us, and so it's easy to start using a lot of the jargon that's associated with our fields. So make sure we're sticking with clear, simple language and prioritizing 1 or 2 key areas for improvement. Now, of course, we want to make sure that our students get like all of the SLOs by the end of the class period, or by the end of the, even the assignment. But even for each assignment that we're working on, they're only going to be able to really focus in a given revision period or whatever the case may be on a couple of things at a time. So giving them, just mountains and mountains and avalanches of feedback in each given round is not really going to be terribly helpful for them. So, for example, take a coding assignment. Instead of saying like your script is confusing, a better approach is to acknowledge what's working and what's working and offer targeted advice. So, for example, here, like your engagement metrics are well implemented. Adding comments for complex sections would enhance readability, right? So clear and direct guidance like this is valuable. So again, a poor example would be your coding assignment is confusing. That doesn't tell the student anything. Okay, why is it confusing? What is confusing about it? What am I supposed to do to improve it? That's a poor example. But an improved example, your function for user engagement metrics is strong. However, we need to add some comments to clarify data sorting in lines 45 through 60. They know exactly what to focus on, exactly what to do, exactly where to add it, right? And so then tip 4, consistency and engagement. Consistency builds trust. If you're telling them the same types of things, the same ways to improve it, so they're not having to come to you and go, wait, 2 weeks ago you told me to do this, and now you're telling me to do this. Which one do you want me to do, right? Consistency. So consistency is going to help us build trust. And when students see uniform standards applied to feedback, they can feel like their work is going to be assessed fairly. And so this also goes to that question of, hang on a second, you told Jack over here that he could do X, but you're telling me that I have to do Y. Which one is correct? We know that our students talk to one another, so we want to make sure that we're being fair and applying the same standards to each one. So again, consistency. At the same time, encouragement can go a long way. So acknowledge progress, no matter how small, to help motivate them further. So imagine telling a student, I've seen better market analyses. This is trash, right? It's discouraging, it's unhelpful, and it's probably going to crush your student. So instead, recognize improvements, even if they're tiny. Your European market trends analysis shows great progress. All right, cool. Any suggesting and then suggesting ways to expand it creates a constructive dialogue. And then finally, tip 5, goal-oriented and personalized feedback. So you always want to align your feedback with the assignment goals. I feel like this is kind of self-explanatory, but beyond that, tailoring your feedback to the individual student is going to make it a lot more meaningful. So be sure to reference their interests or strengths to show that you're invested in their growth whenever you can. So if a student is passionate about sustainability, tie your feedback to that. So like say something like, linking your analysis to environmental impact goals would make your argument even more compelling. Or, so if that student is interested in environmental impact goals and is focusing their dissertation on this, it's going to not only align with the assignment, but it's also going to resonate personally with that student and show them that you're interested not only in them, but their goals, and that you understand what it is that they're working with. Okay, so summary of our key tips, recap, the key to effective feedback lies in being specific, timely, clear, consistent, and personalized. Each of these elements is going to work together to create feedback that's not only informative, but also transformative.